let's get to our good friend Corbin Smith here of Locked On Seahawks. You can follow him on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL and hear him every Monday through Friday along with his co-host Rob Rang over at Locked On Seahawks. Corbin, how are you, brother?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Great, man. Good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. One of the biggest storylines that's sort of going through when it comes to the Seahawks right now, most recently, right? We can leave the Russell Wilson stuff off to the side for a moment, but now,
let's let that stuff die.
Yeah, let's just let that go. But one of the big conversations has been around Jamal Adams. It seems that Pete Carroll seems pretty confident that Jamal Adams will be there for training camp and that things will be okay. What have you heard, or what do you know so far about your sort of insight you can gather on Jamal Adams and the contract situation around him?
So based on past precedent, I would expect that Jamal Adams has a new contract within 2 or 3 days before the start of camp or the first couple of days of camp. That's going to be your 5-6 day window. The Seahawks have signed most of their extensions during that time. I fully anticipate that he is going to be extended during that window. They have to. I mean, even if there's any hesitancy, and I don't think there is, but if there was any hesitancy, it's like you just gave up 2 first-round picks for this player. You think he's going to be a superstar for your defense for years to come. So show him the money. Now, if he's wanting like Myles Garrett type money, they're not going to be showing him that kind of money. But they will pay him. I guarantee that it's going to be in that 17 million, maybe even 18 million range per year. Maybe it comes up a little lower than that, but that's generally what I've heard that he's looking for. He doesn't want to just break the safety record for contracts. He wants to obliterate it because he considers himself a defensive weapon. And he had 9.5 sacks in just 12 games last year. I can understand why he says that. So I expect there's going to be a deal done, though. And if I had to make a prediction, I think it happens right before the start of training camp. Maybe even after they report, they don't actually practice for a couple days. It might happen during that window.
That's interesting. You know, I think for me, I think he's a hell of a player. But the question I have is, obviously, if I'm the Seahawks organization, I'm looking at some of his injury history. And I'm saying, do I really want to pay that much money for a damn good player, by the way? Absolutely. But, I mean, we've seen this trend happen before with teams that, paid for a player that, has had an injury history there, here or there. And then all of a sudden they regret that contract. I mean, do you suspect that with Jamal Adams?
I get where you're coming from, and definitely last year he had 3 different injuries that impacted the season. He missed 4 games with a groin injury. He played through cracked fingers, which I think is the reason that he had 0 interceptions. He had his hands on the ball a couple times, but I'm thinking in the back of my mind, if I had half of my hand with cracked fingers, I'd probably be dropping the ball too.
Sure.
And then he had a shoulder injury that he played through in the wild card round against the Rams. They lost that game, and he had a couple huge missed tackles in that game because he was not 100% and he was playing with a issue in his shoulder that needed to be repaired. So he had multiple surgeries this offseason. So yes, that in the back of your mind is something that you are a little bit concerned about, but I think the Seahawks are also considering he's only 25 years old. And prior to last season, he had been pretty healthy. So I don't think the Seahawks are that concerned about that. And again, there's always going to be a risk when you're signing a guy to a second contract. Even guys that haven't had injuries, we know this game is extremely physical, and guys can start having injuries at any point. So I think that it would be a poor decision on their part, especially with what they've given up to acquire him. Yeah, maybe you can have something in the contract that helps you if there's some injuries that recur here in the next couple of years. But, I mean, they have no choice. I mean, they have to re-sign him, and he's just too good of a player not to bring back, too.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
I also want to throw it this way, too, because we saw the Seahawks defense really struggle last year, too. I mean, it was crazy, the offensive numbers that Russ was putting up, and the offense was, but then all of a sudden the defense, they struggled. They couldn't stop anybody. Obviously, losing Shaquille Griffin this offseason. What are your thoughts on the Seahawks defense as it stands right now, especially after mandatory minicamp leading up into training camp? Is there still concern about that defense heading into this season?
I think there's actually a lot of optimism, and it's not just positive Pete Carroll just spewing his optimism. I look at the front line that they have. Yes, they lost Jaron Reed, but I'm going to throw this name out there, and I promised myself I was not going to jump on the hype train because it always seems like it derails. But Robert Kimdiche has looked fantastic, as much as you can in OTAs and minicamp workouts.
Sure.
I mean, He's playing with enthusiasm. He's going 110% every single rep. And he didn't play last year, so I think he got a wake-up call. Like, this is my last chance. But he told the reporters, but this is the only chance I will need. So he's confident that he's going to be able to get the job done. But we know the talent is there. We know that Robert Kimbiche can be a game wrecker. It just didn't work out. And honestly, he was starting to figure it out before he tore his ACL 2 years ago. So he's fully healthy. He's in phenomenal shape at 300 pounds. You can move him all around the line. So I think you put him with Poona Ford, their defensive end. You've got Carlos Dunlap. Kerry Hyder's very underrated. I like that offseason signing. They've got Alton Robinson coming back. Darrell Taylor's going to be playing the Sam linebacker position, which is very intriguing because of his pass rushing ability. Just a really good athlete, can drop back in coverage, a lot like Bruce Irvin was for the Seahawks for a number of years. So I think that front line is nasty. The linebacking group, Jordan Brooks has a chance to be a breakout player in year 2. Bobby Wagner is still Bobby Wagner. And really, to me, the only question mark in this defense is that cornerback group. But there's still a chance that could be a really good group. Akella Witherspoon ended the 2020 season playing phenomenal football the last three games. He's just been so inconsistent, but he's got that long frame, 6'3", big or long arms, really athletic corner, ball hawking skills. So he fits what they're looking for. And DJ Reed was great in the second half last year. Pierre Desir's looked good so far coming back to Seattle. He's had a track record of being a good starter at one point. So they've got some intriguing guys. I just don't know that they've got a sure thing there. So that would be my one concern. The safeties, Jamal Adams is obviously a great player. And I think Quandre Diggs is one of the most underrated safeties in the entire game. So this defense really started to click in the second half when they got Dunlap, and more importantly, when Jamal Adams came back from his groin injury and he got more comfortable in the defense. I think some of the pieces they've added, the wild card is Alden Smith. If he's able to play with the other defensive linemen they've got, if I'm another quarterback on another team, I'm getting a little bit scared going into these games because they've got a lot of depth and a lot of unique types of pass rushers on the outside and on the inside on that D-line.
Yeah, and apparently at safety too, where you're getting all those sacks out of Jamal Adams, right? It's coming from everywhere. Once again, y'all, you can follow Corbin at Corbin Smith NFL. I catch him every day over on Locked On Seahawks. Corbin, before we get you out of here, I want to ask you. Usually we ask questions about players that are currently on the team. I actually want to ask about someone that's presently a free agent, linebacker KJ Wright. What would a team that signs him end up getting out of this player that might be on they call it the wrong side of 30, but he's on the other side of 30, but he's still, I think, a very talented player. What would a team get with a guy like KJ Wright? And is there any interest, or do you think there would be any interest at all in a reunion with the Seahawks?
So I don't think the door has been closed yet on him coming back to Seattle, but I think it's almost shut. That's my personal opinion. I just mentioned a few minutes ago Darrell Taylor. He didn't play last year, coming back from leg surgery. That was a huge disappointment for the Seahawks, but he's been doing that hybrid role all offseason where he's rushing some as a defensive end, but he's around 250 pounds. They're hoping to get him back up to around 260. Sure. But he can play that Sam linebacker spot easily. He's got the athleticism. He played some linebacker at Tennessee in college. They like him a lot at that position. And KJ Wright, as great of a player as he's been, and last year I will argue was the best year of his career. That's what I would say for other teams looking for linebacker help. He's a fantastic player still. He is not a pass rushing presence, though. That he's just not going to be a guy that can pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. Darrell Taylor is exactly that. That's probably the best attribute in his game, is his burst upfield, his ability to turn the corner on tackles. So he brings a dimension to that Sam linebacker spot that KJ Wright simply does. Now, on the flip side, I'm hesitant about Darrell Taylor, how he's going to fit there from a run defense standpoint. KJ Wright, when he moved over there early last season to replace Bruce Irvin, he was just a monster setting the edge. And he's got those long arms. He's a physical player. He's as smart of a linebacker as you're going to find in the league. Good luck trying to run jet sweeps over there. And even last year, he had to play on Kyler Murray. KJ Wright has never been a great athlete for the position. But Kyler Murray's running read option, and he smoked him about 3 yards in the backfield. You just don't see linebackers off the edge doing that, especially a guy that doesn't have great athletic tools. But KJ Wright gets the job done. And so that would be my one concern for Seattle. You're losing that ability there. And if you can't set the edge, then it really impacts all facets of your defense.
Sure.
So he's a fantastic leader in the locker room and on the field, outstanding in the community, and he's a darn good football player. Only player in the league last year with double-digit tackles for loss and double-digit passes defense. So, again, he to me had his best season of his career. But I understand Seattle's perspective, too. They want to get Darrell Taylor in the field. I mentioned all the depth they have at defensive end. He's not going to get a lot of snaps there. So I think this is a perfect scenario to be able to get him on the field, and he's got the ability to drop back in coverage. They've also got Cody Barton there, who they think could play that position if Taylor somehow doesn't pan out or training camp's a struggle for him. I don't expect that. So I don't think it's ruled out, but I think he's probably playing for another team just because it's not even money. Seattle has the cap space, I think, to re-sign him. They just they want to go young. They've got Jordan Brooks and they've got Darrell Taylor, and they want those guys getting reps. So
yeah, absolutely. Corbin, we appreciate you so much for taking the time to come through. Make sure you catch Corbin and Rob over at Locked On Seahawks. You can follow Corbin on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. We appreciate you coming through, buddy.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate jumping on.
Thanks, Corbin.